Good afternoon, everyone, and we are ready to get started with our webinar. Thank you all, the attendees and the panelists for joining Keeping Up with Frontline. This is a monthly webinar where we hope to engage with the L&D and the operation community at large so that we can discuss various topics and learn from industry experts on what are the trends that are happening in the industry, what can we learn as best practices, and so on. Today's webinar topic is course completion a true indicator of a skilled frontline employee? On the offset, it might seem like this question might have a very obvious answer. And that's what we realized as well until we started digging a little deeper to what this actually meant. And through this webinar, we hope to unpack certain practices, certain theories where can we really understand what this means and what it means for our organization specifically. So before we start the webinar where I start engaging with the participants, we'd like to do a quick definition of terms in terms of what do we mean by course completion, what do we mean when we say a true indicator and skilled frontline employees. So the easiest of this is obviously course completion. And for the purpose of this discussion, we're looking at course completion as any asynchronous activity that the learner does by themselves, where they're watching a video, listening to an audio, maybe reading a PDF, doing an assessment, and so on. Completion activity of those tasks is what we will be considering. The next one, before moving on to true indicator, I'm going to look at what skilled frontline employee is and maybe spend a little time here. Before maybe we explain this, I'd like to take you through a quick activity that will help us maybe put this into context, right? So I'm going to show you pictures of 3 paintings done by various painters, and I'd like you to figure out or make a decision for yourself whether the painter whether the painting based on the painting is the painter based on the painting that you see is skilled. So is he or she a skilled painter? So this is the first image. So this painting is called Almond Blossom. Just make a decision in your mind whether the painter who painted this is a skilled painter. It's a very simple yes or no. Similarly, this one is titled A Farmer with, I think, Farmer with Millet was what this one was called. And the third one is a very popular one. This is The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. So if you look at these 3 paintings, and you might have assumed whether the painters are skilled or not, right? So if you'd ask me, I would rank this one the highest and say, okay, this painter might be the most skilled. Maybe the Almond Blossom comes second, and this one maybe third. So this may be what you might be thinking as well. But if I add another piece of context and say, well, all of these 3 paintings have been painted by Vincent van Gogh, then your idea of skilled, your perception of what a skilled painter is slightly changes, because I've added new information to say all of them are painted by the painter who did The Starry Night, right? So with that context, what I'd like to talk about in skilled frontline employee is that this is not it's not an objective that is common for all organizations and for all leaders alike. A skilled frontline employee is very subjective to the organization we work with, because the context, just like with the painter that I added, the context for defining what a skilled frontline employee depends on the business objective that we are all working towards in our learning, training, L&D, or even operational department. And that's something I'd like for you to keep in mind as we go forward, because a skilled frontline employee can be different for all of us, and it's different for the panelists as well today, where they're coming from various organizations where their definition of who a skilled frontline employee is very different. So in this context, if we come back to course completion, we can link it to being initiatives, whether L&D or operational initiatives that we're looking at. And true indicator is just going to be a measurement that we're going to see. So through the webinar, what we're looking at is how can we connect these 3 buckets that we've put out here, and what learnings can we have from this. So ideally, the business objective will let us know what initiatives need to be done. The initiatives are then measured, and those measures are then aligned to see whether the business objectives are met or not. And this becomes like a cyclic process where, depending on the roles that we play, we either are in charge of the entire process, or we pitch in maybe at an initiative level, or maybe at a measurement level. So irrespective of what your role is, we're going to be looking at this entire process with our panelists in this afternoon's webinar. This webinar is divided into 3 parts. The first one is where our panelists will take us through certain questions, looking at training and L&D in mind. The part 2 is when we're going to be connecting certain thoughts and ideals to business objectives. And the third is my favorite part of the webinar, which is a sample application where whatever we've seen in part 1 and part 2, we're going to be discussing as a panel a live situation that might help you as the audience understand how can some of these things that the panelists have spoken about actually be applied in reality, and we'll go through a sample or a practical application there. So that very quickly is an introduction to the webinar and what we will be doing. If at any time you have a question that you'd like, please do share it in the chat, and I will pick it up for our panelists and plug it in based on where our discussion is heading. So first, I'm not going to formally welcome our panelists, because I think as I go in our questions, I'm going to introduce them and talk to you about what they do. So I'll move on to the first question that I have, and I'm going to direct this to Ms. Gauri. And she's coming in with a lot of experience in the L&D and HR strategy space. And the question that we're going to address to her is the broad topic of the webinar is, when do you think course completion can be a good indicator for a skilled frontline employee? Because I'm drawing in from the experience that you have of working with an organization that had a large number of SKUs, and therefore product mastery or product knowledge mastery would have been a key indicator for you to measure success in the organization that you worked with. So your thoughts on this, Ms. Gauri?
Sure, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, we can.
Yes, perfect. So first of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's wonderful to share these thoughts. I would like to begin first by saying that, look, the course completion for sure is a key indicator of success. Having said that, may not always be the only indicator, right? One would need to eventually support it with a lot of practical assessments, on-job performance, feedback, from supervisors, from customers, etc. Again, having said that, I would say employees who complete the course clearly demonstrate, their personal, professional commitment towards their professional development or their personal development, right? Also, a course completion is also standardizes the way everybody learns. So there's a certain consistency, and there's a certain quality and standard that the organization maintains when you're, disseminating the training to a large number of people in a similar consistent manner. Now, I'm of the opinion that when one needs to learn the what part of the skills, and when I'm saying what part of the skills, like you rightly said, Susanna, for a frontline employee, it's important to understand their product. So from a product, USP, benefits, features perspective, from a skill acquisition perspective, course completion would be I would say a pretty good indicator. Having said that, when you have to move on to the how part of it, which means once you've acquired your skills, to implement those skills correctly, and you would definitely need other methods like role plays, on-job trainings, etc. If I had to summarize, I would say a course completion is great when you have to have certain skill acquisition, you have to acquire certain skills, which means if the course provides you the right skills and knowledge that are directly applicable to the job or the personal goals, then that would be a great indicator. It would equip you now to move on to the next step to now start implementing those skills. So product benefits, USPs, price points, all these elements, and like you said, in the retail industry, this is so important for the also elements like comprehensive SOPs, a lot of standard operating procedures that say even hospitality or aviation industry, or even for that matter in our case in retail industry, understanding and knowing of those SOPs, and you equip them with the knowledge in those SOPs clearly is your course completion would be a great indicator. Other certification programs, for example, you need to move up from one level to the other, or a promotion for which you need to go through a certain course, which could be IT related, software related, some kind of academic degree course. Those ones I would say, which equip you to demonstrate, acquire and be competent to complete the course. I would say a course completion is a great indicator. But then we will talk further in terms of how part of it would require a little bit more support than just purely course completion as we define it. So, I hope I answered that correctly.
Definitely. So I think we learned that course completion is a good indicator if we're looking at testing the comprehension, understanding of certain content, and assessments are a great way to benchmark, like you mentioned, the learnings of the cohort that we are dealing with. I think with that, I'd connected to Jovita and gaining from her experience of working with organizations where she's developed like an end-to-end role progression, a progression program for specific job roles. I'd like maybe for you, Jovita, to shed some light on what initiatives have you found most effective in building these skilled frontline employees, where what Gauri said in terms of the what is also measured, but we're also looking at the how and the skill-based learning. You might, you're on mute, Jovita, just.
Audible?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. What works with the frontline, and being very closely involved in frontline learning since 2006 now, if it is put in the form of a learning capsule, it puts them off, because we are talking about our country's frontline staff. So it's very different when it comes to back-end training. Is a completely different ballgame. They look for more research articles, they look for more anecdotal references, and to get deeper into things. But frontline is completely different. And what I have seen working the most with them has been bite-size learning content. Something which is not more than one module, not more than 2 to 3 minutes max. And that is what is very difficult to make, because when you talk about downloading information to frontline, we just think of putting in anything, everything from A to Z, and then even from 1 to 10. And but then that ends up making a learning capsule which is 45 minutes long or 1 hour long. While they are interested in bite-size online animated content, they are not going to use their data, mobile data and bandwidth to consume that content which is lasting that long. That is one. Secondly, the attention span. If they were to sit in one place and follow what you are trying to tell them through a document or through a PPT, they wouldn't be there doing that job. So it is extremely critical to know that what works with them is animated content, vernacular content, and it needs to be 2 to 3 minutes max. There's an advantage for us also in doing this, because whenever there is a process change, whenever there is a new update that needs to be incorporated, it becomes very easy, because you just need to change that one byte of the module. You don't have to change the entire content, which is what people struggle with. With a 1 hour video, you need to redo the whole thing because some parts of the videos have changed. Sure. So, it works both ways and very beautifully. So, yeah, animated content, bite-sized video modules, and vernacular content is what works.
Sure. And Jovita, can you shed some light in the progression curriculums that you have built? I'm sure there are a combination of these bite-sized videos and certain skill-based assessments on the floor. So just a little light on what those skill-based assessments could be. What have you done to evaluate the actual skills on the floor of your frontline teams?
Sure. The best way of evaluation is a graded assessment, and this assessment has to be a role-play based assessment, where the manager probably records the role play and puts it up on some learning platform. and a proper scorecard, and it should not be ambiguous like he was great, he was good, he was not so good. So it should have things, it should have a defined scale. So if you're rating him 5, why are you rating him 5? That needs to be defined by the content curator. So he was able to do X, Y, Z, and all of this came out in the role play. He will get a 4 if he was able to do X and Y alone. He will get a 3 if he was able to do just X, and probably with the prompting a little bit of Y. So again, it comes back to this possible. Otherwise, the best operator and the best trainer will end up training the best team, and it becomes extremely subjective and definitely not a model that is simple and definitely not scalable. So the more you articulate the rankings and the ratings, designation wise also, it's very simple. At an entry level, what is an employee, what is expected out of him, what are his key KPIs at a entry level, say 1. Then when he progresses to the next level, what are the additional KPIs that get added? It is never that he will move on to a different set of KPIs altogether. No, he needs to know his entry level, and then an additional 3-4 skills get latched onto him, and then as he grows up, again an addition. So he should have the lower 2 skills too and grow up. That becomes very important, instead of just seeing whether he fits the bucket that you're identifying him for. If he is able to accumulate his skills over time, that is when we have a good all-rounders who are very clear in their mind in terms of what is expected out of them in terms of delivery.
Very nice. So I think I've taken away 2 points from you, where you talked about defining the assessment rubric to figure out very clearly for the user as well as for the organization what is the level of success that we're looking at. And I think the second bit is how accumulating skills over time will help them reach for what is it that they can do in the organization. So in terms, so shifting gears to maybe addressing a conversation to training retail employees on scale, that's where, Jagdish, I'd like for you to pitch in, because I know you've worked in consistently in QSR organizations where maintaining a very consistent combination of product knowledge as well as process alignment becomes very, very important. So if you can just shed some light on how you've handled having these consistent broad training initiatives and holistic in nature so that it addresses this large crowd that you have to deal with.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks, Gauri. Thank you, Susanna, for having us here. And thank you, Gauri and Jovita, for shedding lights on certain the lot of aspects here. It sort of makes my life a little bit easier answering this question. That's what Susanna's put me up to. So, Susanna, as you asked in, how sort of we could scale up or use the L&D initiatives to scale for a larger scale. In today's world, it sort of makes it easier with the technology that we have currently. I think it makes it easier. So, having spent about close to 15 years with the L&D function, and having worked with few of the QSRs, brands, if I just go back in date, it was a difficult task to bring things across a larger number of stores. I'll just talk about one of my previous experiences where we had about 100+ outlets across 7 different cities. So this was a task actually, right? Because we can't do it at one time at once. You need to probably break it down to a certain city by city or probably district by district, etc. So by the time it reaches the last city, I think the essence of the program sort of loses. But not the case today, right? Not the case today, because today I can sit in the office and sort of roll out a training plan which can reach out to thousands of my frontline employees across the country. So I think with technology, things have got easier. Having said that, a lot has changed in terms of the inclusion of these frontline employees in terms of their attention span. I think that's exactly this Jovita's sort of touch base thing. She said having their attention span, minimizing attention span has become a case of some type of concern for L&D guys, basically, because back in classroom days it was easier because you sort of could administer the classroom, getting that attention to you and sort of making sure whatever you've been teaching that sort of goes down to them in a better way. With an technology-based coaching or learning, basically what happens is though it can go to a larger audience, you sort of lose the attention. Basically, they have a lot of things. Let's say you have, let's say today's session as well, we have some few 20 odd people. I don't know how many of them are doing multitasking around here, right? Some of them are listening to us. Some of them probably are also browsing their phones. So this sort of happens, right? You are probably looking at one of the modules and still are engaged with a lot of other activities. So that's a bigger thing that we need to probably work on. Having said that, again, I'll just thank Jovita for her idea on having a 2 to 3 minutes videos, or probably like animated videos, which sort of seeks the attention as well as delivers the information that is required on a much shorter span of time. You can't expect people to glue down to the screens for over 5 minutes. Even if 2 to 3 minutes are sort of gets very difficult for people to get in, unless the content is really creative. I think that's where, if you look at some of the social media platforms, the reels just sort of pretty trendy these days. I think that's playing a major role, and it sort of takes a lot of time. So if you could just utilize that technology and that sort of, I would say, medium to use our learning as an L&D initiative, I think it reaches a larger scale as well as keeps a similar kind of impact on the frontline employees. And these days, people are pretty much tech savvy. Sure. One of the days that we were struggling with, how to use a phone, etc. Everyone around is a tech savvy these days. They may not be essentially academically good. They are all good at smartphones, right? So you need to utilize that. India being a very youthful nation, for that matter, I think we need to utilize that. And if you want to put up any L&D initiative across a larger scale, use this technology. Use what's trending on. If the reels is trending, use the reels to your benefit. Create content in terms of which is more engaging. May not be essentially interactive, but engaging enough for them to catch the attention on, and that sort of should help you out reaching out to a larger scale of numbers.
Understood. So I think I'm taking away the fact that you're talking about, for this generation that we are dealing with, the importance of figuring out how to capture their attention for specific periods of time becomes very important. And your recommendation is to see how maybe social media trends can be kind of leveraged into the learning technologies that we deal with every day. So just maybe transitioning to the business objective kind of space, where since part one, we talked about the L&D considerations that we have to do in training and operations. Now, if we look at how to align these initiatives that we plan in the L&D space into business objectives, Jagdish, can you talk a little bit about what are some metrics that you are tracking in your organization, or you have experience tracking, to be able to say, I've met the objectives of my operations team or the business objectives that has been laid out for the department?
Okay. So one obvious metric essentially is the module completion, right? So that sort of gives us a very, in a nutshell, of understanding let's say, for example, an initiative is put up, a module has been put up. So the one very obvious way of making sure that has been met is module completion. Right? I look at the module completion. I get the data passed on to the operations team. I tell them, your team has sort of completed this many numbers of module. So this gives me an idea that this number of people are done with the particular learning, right? And the execution of it is again a different subject altogether. Having said that, at least these guys who have completed the module are sort of well prepared to be able to cater to that particular learning that we have put in place. Also, having said that, that's not the only one. There are other parameters, other metrics that are essentially sort of touch base. Basically, one of them I would say is role plays. I think another metric that we can actually talk of. Like role plays in terms of, let's say, or even the sales numbers for that matter, or the business numbers really matters. Let's say, let me give you an example that was very recent to me. So we were sort of struggling with rising sales of a certain product, right? So what we wanted to do was, like, we wanted to pitch a certain product, and we made a training plan around it, and we rolled it out. And the next best thing that we wanted to do was, we rolled out a video-based module, which is rolled out. Then a role plays which was done to support that. Third thing is the tracking of these metrics, right? I mean, that it's a very, let's say, for example, you just track that particular item or that particular food product, basically, how the sales have been, and have a comparative study from the month on month, or a apple to apple comparison from the last month to this month. And that's one of the metric probably we would see. Yes, this again, there's numbers achieved. based on the kind of learning that you was rolled on, basically. So again, the sales numbers is one thing. So basically, the business has two things, right? One is the increasing of a sale number, or it's the reduction of cost. So again, that could be an example of, let's say, we want to reduce a cost of a certain element, or so we do that. We say, let's say, how to save, how to control wastage for that matter, right? So we wrote a program out, we do a video of that. So again, we tell the guys how does these controlling wastage helps, and etc. We explain the whys of it, etc. and the benefits. Once that is done, again, you sort of track back on what are the numbers in terms of how these things has helped you track a particular metric. So essentially, if you look at in terms of metrics of a business objective being met, so from an L&D perspective, is the what do you call NPS score, sort of what do you call the feedbacks from the employees, the managers, the ops team, ops leaders, the model completion, as we already said. So these are the very obvious metrics that we can help us to get an understanding of how an L&D is successful, initiative is successful. On the business side of it, I think more the numbers. So based on a particular, very specific product that you touched in, we look at that numbers, how the numbers have increased, and that sort of gives a clear indication of how well or not a particular L&D initiative has been.
Yeah. So I think I've made a note of the fact that you talked about making consistently tracking these metrics, because we might roll out a lot of initiatives, but consistently track them against the business goal, like you mentioned, of increasing sales, or the NPS score kind of helps you figure out what needs to be done a little more, what needs to be reduced, are there new situations that you need to tackle, and so on. So that, I think, Jagdish, is something that we've definitely noted down. Something very similar to you, Gauri, as well, is because I think in the organizations that you've worked with, customer-centric skills become very important, because you're dealing with customers, you need to do consultative selling or upselling of certain products. So in that particular scenario, how are you looking at the learning metrics connecting to business objectives?
So honestly, customer centricity is so key today, whether it's any kind of services, and more so in our kind of retail frontline, who are the face of the organization. Customer clearly needs to be at the core, and hence it becomes all the more important that we have pretty tangible matrix that we define, and then we ensure that we kind of link the learning matrix to the business results clearly. And this is kind of chalked out and planned way in advance, so that everybody's playing their part well. So if I had to quickly summarize and then give you a small case study that which happened in our organization, one of my previous organizations. So first of all, you have to first clearly define what are your learning objectives. So in this particular case, you would say that we were looking at when it says customer-centric skills, you're looking at, say, understanding customer needs. It could be consultative selling. It could be handling objections. It could be upselling, etc. So you're clearly defining, and you kind of your training objectives are defined, and your content is kind of structured in that manner. Followed by that, you have to clearly define the relevant learning matrix, which means, like my panelist colleague said, you have to look at completion rates, you have to look at assessment scores. You have to, at this stage, also kind of validate and you gratify that employee through gamification, through leaderboards, through recognition, because these things go hand in hand. And like Jovita rightly said, why will at that level the employees learn until and unless you show them some incentive, growth plans, their personal development plans, etc. They're called out in meetings, they're called out in sales reviews, etc., etc. So, clearly defining relevant training matrix. Then the third piece, very, very important, linking it to the business matrix. Now, when I'm saying business matrix, yes, it has to be, in the case of customer-centric scenarios, it has to be your CSAT scores, it has to be your NPS scores, it could be your mystery audit or mystery shopper scores, right? And you define in terms of where from X to Y is that you want the store or the team to go pre-post training. And then, of course, also important are your clear sales matrix, which means in this case, it could be your conversion rates, it could be your average order values, it could be units per transaction, what's the bill penetration like, etc. So it has to have very clearly defined business matrix, linking those learning to the business matrix, right? Has the next phase would be look at a pre and post learning scenarios, where pre-training, how was the scenario? Post-training, was there a change in the learning matrix? And did you see any improvement in the business matrix? Lastly, and most importantly, also have to do some correlation of data, which means, did you see that those employees who are quick, who are learners and who've been regularly completing all their modules, all their courses, etc., is there a correlation that you see that their CSAT scores, their average order values, their conversions in the store are better than the others, which also gives you a sense of, are there gaps? Do you need to improve, etc., etc. And the third piece and the last piece that I want to mention here is also one needs to be very clear about, this will help you also define very role specific trainings. So, for example, in terms of sales matrix, I would say somebody like a manager of the store will need to have certain skills and training around those skills, and then he or she needs to be measured on those. It could be the EBITDA of the store. It could be target versus achievement, which may not be as applicable, or it won't require that kind of proficiency for a consultant, but for a store in charge or a store head, these kind of proficiencies will play rather skills will play a big part, and then your also training have to be kind of defined around those specific roles as well, right? So so largely this is how I would say that you have to link the three: your training objectives, your learning matrix, and followed by the final business outcomes, and do a before and after to see the gaps, see improvement.
Sure, ma'am. So I think I really liked 2 points from you where you talked about planned in advance, because all the stakeholders know their role in the entire process, which becomes very important. So they know where their role kind of comes in. And the second bit is definitely doing the correlation with the high performing employees, because then you can look at the gaps between what is expected and what is currently happening with those who may not be performing as well. And I think in the course of your opinion also, ma'am, I think you answered Shane's question where he talked about since everyone doesn't learn at the same pace, do you incentivize those that learn a little faster than those who don't? And I think from your answer, we understand that maybe, yes, we have to incentivize those who do it faster or do it with more accuracy than those who take a little bit of time. So thank you. I think, Gauri, that really helps. And I think, Jovita, I'd like to end with you in terms of the formal session where we ask questions, and before we move on to the practical scenario bit. We've talked about various initiatives being rolled out, and because I know from your experience, you've actually been part of the end-to-end operations of figuring out the business objectives and rolling out training programs. What are some common pitfalls or mistakes that we can avoid when we try to connect learning matrix with business objectives?
Sure. So when we go in to do a training need analysis, so it is always like the participants or this role holder should be able to do A, B, C things. And we come back with a sign off saying that I should be able to ensure that my program makes the learner do A, B, and C. We never sign off on what will be the measurement criteria of making sure that A has been done successfully, B has been done. And when you do this, you even come to know that it needn't even be A and B, A, B, C. It may be A, B, and Z. Because when you put in numbers at the sign-off phase itself, it's extremely critical, and I think we learning professionals kind of are getting the importance of that only now. Initially, it was like you have a budget, you have to roll out a program, so make it exciting, do the best that can be done. And if it is successful, it's because the operations has done their job well. If it is not successful, it is because training barabar se nahi hua tha. It's like a universal thing. Anything going wrong is the person is not trained. I mean, even if I go to a restaurant, if I don't get a good service, I also say that this person is not well trained. But it is important to know that while he is doing A, B, C, D roles, the measurement indicator business-wise is going to be so and so. And getting that sign off on the first stage itself is extremely critical for a successful program and for the business to be hand in glove with whatever it is that we are proposing. It's also a very clear ballpark of whether we're incorporating the right kind of learning elements into our program or not. Yeah, so that's the mistake we do, as in we try to hog for, oh no, the increase in basket size is because of my training, but all of that comes much later and the credit is never given to the learning professionals. So it's better if this thing is signed off before. Another mistake that we do is we feel that a successful program means 100% attendance and certification score of 85%, and this is the man hours that we have invested and this is the learning hours. It doesn't make any difference to the people who are even supporting you through all of this. I mean, it's just Greek and Latin to them. So till you don't tell them that, so while you take a sign off on those key business parameters, it's also the next step for you before going into what the blended learning should be that what is my current state of these numbers before the initiative started. So this again is something that we don't, because of lack of time or there's a pressure, by the end of this month I want it rolled out. But, it's important that we even package our work right. So we need to track what is the number looking like today and what is it like when the person is in the training phase, say, first 1 month post training. And if he continues in the role, then post 45 days, like the Kirkpatrick level 3, what is it like, when the person is confident about doing it, whether there has been some correlation or not. And I have tracked this, and all the time there is no correlation, but it is a good way and the right way to go about.
So I think, Jovita, you've clearly defined it very nicely. You've said ensuring that the measurement criteria for meeting those objectives are clearly defined from an L&D perspective, and the fact that doing a baseline immediately after setting those measurement criteria is very important, because they know that this was what it was. This is what we started out with. The training intervention has happened, and because of that, there could be an improvement and so on. So I think that really is very clear for all of us. I have a question from Nitesh. Along those lines. So he's currently asking that sometimes the operations team would like their employees to have a high level of proficiency in their skill from day one. So how would onboarding for frontline employees look like in a reality scenario where we know that's not possible? They won't be skilled from day one. So what are some things that you do to ensure that even though they're skilled faster, but not definitely from day one?
So I'd like to take that. So what I have done in my current place is, and we have an attrition of about, say, 10 to 20% percent every month. So I'm talking about minimum wage employees who kind of rotate jobs every month just for another 100, 200 rupees hike. So it happens that after 4 months he comes back to our store itself. So that also happens a lot. But what has helped me is that I make everything process notes very pictorial and keep it as a book in the store as well as on the LMS. So if there is any process that the person needs to familiarize himself with, even if the store manager or his manager is not available at that point for the training, the ready reckoner is something that helps him. So he observes another and the ready reckoner kind of helps. More and more, as right now I'm kind of handling 15,000 employees across 9 states. And scalability, simplicity is something that has to, and I don't have a team. So my team size, I just have one subordinate. And the more I'm put in this situation without a team running this kind of a training, the more I'm seeing that content is the king. So it is about time we start focusing on sensible content. It's not like the business has given us a PPT and we make a PDF out of it and we say refer. No, that's not going to work. So the more and more we make the content engaging, simple, easy to follow, uh, and they should know where it is available. So then they don't have an excuse. So that's what works
For sure.
for
I
me.
think ensuring that content is available and they know where the content is available, and definitely having it as a ready reckoner, I think helps. So hopefully, Nidesh, that helps answer your question. If there are any questions, please do leave it in the Q&A, and we'll definitely try our best to answer them through the course of the webinar. So we're moving to the last bit, which is the practical scenario, which is my favorite part of the webinar. We have about 10 minutes. I'm maybe going to push it to 15, where the panelists can spend 2 to 3 minutes explaining their idea that we have. And before we move into that, I'll quickly maybe share what we're going to do in the practical scenario. So like all of us might be tracking that there is the Paris Olympics that is currently happening, and we're desperately hoping for certain medals this week. And in light of that, what I'd like to do is use the theory that our panelists have shared through their experiences into a new situation like this, so we can understand how they think. So in the Paris Olympics, sorry, I'll just move that back. So in the Paris Olympics, there are about 45,000 volunteers who participate in the Olympics to just help with the entire sorry, I'm just having a little bit trouble with my video. So I'll let it play and get to that point. So there are 45,000 volunteers that help make sure that the Olympics are run very smoothly. And so the objective or the task that I'd given the panelists is to say, if you were in charge of these 45,000 volunteers that help out at the Olympics, how would your training plan be? And the volunteers have a mission. They have 3 missions, 3 different missions that they have to meet, which comes up on the screen here. The experience, the performance, and efficient organization of the event. So each of the panelists have picked 1 mission each. And what they're going to share with you is to say what is their mission, what are their objectives, and then figure out what is the training intervention that they're going to consider. And then what is their measurement success, the successful measurement that they're going to use. And through this, hopefully, as the audience, you can get a glimpse of how our panelists are thinking, what are the skills that they are applying in order to meet these objectives and roll out these training plans. The most important part of this practical example is that it's not about the content. It's not about what sport they picked, what mission they picked. It's the skill with which they are planning the trainings, their initiatives, what are their measurements of success, and those hopefully are key elements that we can pick out and apply in terms of transfer of learning in our organizations as well. So that in very brief is what is going to happen in the next 15 minutes, is where our panelists are going to share their training plans, their measurements of success, their initiatives that they're going to use to fulfill the mission that they've picked out for their set. So I think we'll start off with Ms. Gauri, if you can go through your mission and talk us through your plan that you have in mind.
Sure. Are you, Susanna, are you going to start presenting on the
Yes.
slide?
Can you
Yeah.
see? Yeah.
I can. Yeah. So if you could just, yeah. So essentially, guys, the mission that I chose was to ensure seamless and timely execution of all scheduled athletic running events at the Paris Olympics, which the dedicated volunteers will provide complete support and coordination. A quick background story in terms of why I chose this is, over the last 3 days, if you saw the 2 big highlight events which happen are to, where we all eyes are for, are looking to that event, which is who's the fastest man on earth and who's the fastest woman on earth, right? And when I was watching with boys in the house, I was watching it in the night, and I saw that at the women's event, okay, the 100 meters events, 100 meters running event, I'm sorry, women's event, you can see that the athletes have it's high pressure, and it's all their hard work, and it's that few seconds, and it started raining cats and dogs, okay, and it was crazy, and it was commendable to see how quickly the volunteers moved, how they cleansed the track, how they took the athletes inside, how they kind of calmed the athletes, asked them to whatever sit, offer them whatever thing to offer, brought them outside again when the kind of the rain subsided, etc. So it was interesting to see that. The next thing I see is the fastest man on earth. Now, again, high pressure, the whole race gets over in a little over 9 seconds. After the race is over, I see that between the top two guys, the results are still not displayed on the screen, because first time in the history of Olympics, between the gold medalist and the silver medalist, there was a difference of 0.005 seconds. And you could see the expression on the athlete's face that, hey, show the results in me. Am I gold or silver? And at that time it came to my mind, oh my God, these volunteers must be going through what when these things happen. You have to have things so much in place. And that's why I kind of also chose this, supporting sports performance, supporting the athletes' performance, and more so I chose something to do with the athletes, running events. So I defined my objectives as saying, first, there has to be a timely execution, which means all the race events need to be happen and start at the time that they are scheduled. Clearly, volunteers have to be mandatorily trained and should have high confidence level to handle all kinds of situations. Maintain high standards of infrastructure, which means that so that the athletes have any minimal disruptions. Optimal operations efficiencies, which means very minimum incidence of any delay, any quick resolution, even if there are medical exigencies, right? In terms of indicators to those objectives, I said first, event punctuality, which means you have to look at the percentage of events which are supposed to happen at a particular time, and did they happen, not happen, to what extent did they happen? So, a measure which I'll talk about later. Clearly, what is the completion rate of all these volunteers, and were they all trained on the specific role that they're supposed to do? All infrastructure readiness, which means time taken to solve any infrastructure issues. Feedback scores from the athletes, from the coaches, from the officials in terms of tact for providing the infrastructure and overall event management. Any complaints that were raised by the athletes or by the referees. And finally, in terms of operational efficiencies, again, average response time to resolve any issues, including any emergency medical response. All right. Now, basis that, I kind of said, this is a little, I'm not going to take, in the interest of time, largely you look at a training design. And in terms of implementation, you need to ensure that right from introduction, orientation, event scheduling, what is each one's roles, responsibilities, any best practices, what are the SOPs to be followed, what are the communication and protocol techniques for the officials, for the athletes, what kind of emergency procedures, customer service in terms of crowd management, for example, followed by any practical trainings, very important, practical trainings and drills. So all kinds of simulations, hands-on experience that you give these volunteers readiness. And then, look, I'm not a sports expert, but honestly, if the event gets over in 9 seconds and 8 seconds and 12 seconds, we do expect that the volunteers have to kind of respond to any, say, infrastructure issue within at least 5 minutes. And how do you identify that? You do logs and reports from event coordinators, or for that matter, athlete satisfaction scores have to be over 8, going up to 10. Number of complaints can't be more than, say, 4 or 5 in the entire day. So, you can clearly define measurable indicators, and in order to kind of say that yes, we have met the outcomes and our training kind of has turned out to be effective. So these measurements of success are kind of related to the objectives that I had kind of jotted down earlier. If so that's how it is.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think that definitely puts things into perspective in terms of how you've thought of doing this training plan and measuring, especially your key indicators. There is an interesting question that has come up, which maybe we'll take at the end of the two presentations from Jovita and Jagdish. Is sometimes, and in case of the Paris Olympics, right, you may not have the strictest control over the choice of volunteers that you get. They might not sometimes meet the minimum criteria that you require as an organization, and that therefore hinders your training plans, because you expect a certain baseline in terms of the members that you are training. So just something for us to think about and we'll address this at the end. I think we'll take 10 more minutes to kind of wrap up the webinar as well. So just to repeat the question, sometimes we don't have control over the candidates who are hired from the HR department. And so they may not meet the basic requirements that you would assume they have when they come into the training plan. And that hinders your compliance, hinders your measurements and so on. So what then can we do in those scenarios is something that we'll address at the end of the two presentations. So Jagdish, if you can quickly run us through your mission, your indicators and your training plan for the Paris Olympics.
Sure. So my mission here is to see how the volunteers welcome the people from the globe, from around the globe, and make that experience and probably provide support to the during the games as well, and make the experience memorable. So to do so, obviously, as we said, the first thing that we wanted to do was put these volunteers into different categories, essentially. Identifying based on the skill levels or based on their experience levels, sort of categorize them on various levels. And this could be essentially, one would be the guest service or probably the reception of people. Now, for this, obviously, you need to have a set of people who probably understand various languages. One, understand the regional specifications, like probably now this being happening at Paris. So I want to have a person who understands Paris, right, geographically. The commute, how does one commute from the airport to the venues, etc., between the venues, from the hotel to the venues, etc. So someone who understands, a set of people who understand all these geographical, knowledge, who possess geographical knowledge, and obviously the customer, they have to possess a good customer-centric attitude, essentially, right? Because we're dealing with people who probably have spent a good fortune to reach this country and probably look at sports, right? So obviously, that we need to understand that we need to give them the best experience right from the moment they step at the airport. So that's something that we sort of look at. So these are the best customer-centric people who are the face of the airport, bringing people from the airport to the respective hotels or to venues, etc. So that's one. Second, we also want to know, we want to have a set of people who handle queries, right? We'll have queries from from a different, what do you call it? It could be queries, claiming from what a sports event to about the country, to the food, etc., and so on and so forth. So we need to have a set of people who sort of be able to answer these queries in the best of the knowledge and the best ability capabilities. Then we talk of event-specific training as well. When I say event-specific training, again, it's a Paris Olympics. We talk about various events happening, various sporting events happening. So we want to have people who understand these events well. Right? So if I'm talking about someone who ask questions about the running, so I need to know what happens in running. Like as what Gauri mentioned, the running is a 9 seconds event. I can't expect a 2-hour event in a running, it's on a track event. So those kind of information probably is very essential for people to understand, or someone who understands the very basics of the every different events that comes up, right? Then the safety and security part. That's again a very big concern, big thing, because we're dealing with thousands and lakhs of people around at the same time. So the safety part of it, or the security part of it, is a very essential thing. Giving them, briefing people on what are the safety points, what are the fire exit points, what are the security points, etc., and so on. Then the cultural awareness is another one. Is be aware of the local culture as well as the cultural awareness of the people who are probably as spectators who come in. So understanding there are various things that to my experience, I have met people who have certain who do not like a certain I would say gestures, right? So that's a very important aspect of it. Understanding local cultural major thing to make or break a particular experience. Then the logistics, right? Logistics and operations again a very major thing that sort of makes this event successful. Then the technology part of it, use of technology. Like I think that there are a lot of things. This happens. Probably how one gets into a stadium. Maybe it's no more. Probably it's an app that works on basically, right? So understanding of technology is another major part that I would probably have a set of volunteers who are in IT experts maybe, or probably at least have a basic understanding of IT, how a particular app works in, or any technology that's been a part of this particular whole event, understanding of that, and and helping people also understand this and make a use of it. Then I think it's the final preparation basically. When I say final preparation, is basically once the people are in the country, in their respective probably abodes, from there traveling from there into the hotels or into the events, etc. So, and once they are into the events, also making sure they sort of settle down, they understand, and from there to go back, going back to the hotels or going back to the countries back, etc. It's a complete cycle, right from day one, the step in to seeing the whole events and going back. So this is the sort of from a training perspective, I would say one, I would want to categorize them as a different understanding the skill levels. I would want to categorize them into different categories and giving them the very specific roles of what they be doing, and probably briefing them on what are the integrities of each of these roles. Right now, as a part of an indicators of how successful or of that particular the whole training has been, the major, I think the one very obvious indicator in this aspect of mine is the feedbacks. I think now it's a very subjective thing because how I define my conveniences could be differently from anybody else defining convenience. Having said that, I think this is the one major indicator that happens. Secondly, it's also the sort of feedbacks coming from the event, the venues, basically. Maybe the event organizers, if they feel that yes, everything went well from as an event perspective, it's also a sort of an indication that my volunteers have done well in making sure the experience has gone well for these all these spectators. Right? I think that's how I look at it. I think that's how I would put up. I'm sorry I couldn't make a lot of presentation as what Gauri did. That was very comprehensive. But I think, this is how I would probably deal with the volunteers here.
Definitely, I think some key points that you brought out, Jagdish. I really like the fact that you in the beginning defined the job roles that you had for the volunteers. You, I think, put out 6 or 7 and said these are the buckets of people, and that for us as L&D translates to job roles and have their specific responsibilities. And you're linking feedback back to those, I think, will as a key measure of success. I think definitely works. So thank you for your input, Jagdish. I think I've made a note of that as well. Jovita, over to you for your mention.
Yeah. So I've been struggling with this topic, to be very honest. I made it very clear before also. So I'm a kind of person who likes to break down even to the micro level, and the topic is so vast. And Susanna told me 5 minutes you need to cover. So what made sense of what can be covered in 5 minutes is what I'm doing. Gauri, I will take the KPIs and the measurement parameters of what you presented. They're beautiful. What I've put together probably is a 10 days training program. So it's like once they come in, so how do we go about, what do we do on day 1, day 2, day 3? That is what I've come up with. So basically the importance has been shared by the other panelists, and how do we go about achieving it is what I've put together. I think there will be 2 parts to this. One is the video-based trainings, which can be done prior to them coming in. And then once they are in here, the training which needs to be done in person. So I have kind of defined that. So maybe what I've put under VILT is basically, like Jagdish said, the cultural awareness and sensitivity, basically to understanding and respect of the diversity that is in the room. So that is something that courseware can go on that, and assessments can be done on that before they come in for the session. And also, Olympic values and the history of Olympics, these kind of things is what we can send as courseware to them, maybe on a fortnightly basis or on a alternate day basis, where we pick up each value of the Olympics, so each circle, what it represents and how it's been going through time, and basically increase their GK on Olympics. I mean, if I was a volunteer, I would have loved this, because I have very limited knowledge on the background of Olympics, to be sure. So I would have liked it being a volunteer. Then probably once they are in-house, and then starts a 10-day course with them, where the first day is about the orientation session. In the orientation, we will basically again do the introduction to Olympics, and make the volunteers aware of what roles they have been selected or shortlisted for, and what are the expectations out of those roles. So that is a brief that will be given to them on day 1, and then it can be a day of them getting to know each other, some team building activities, basically getting them to work together first, can be like the starter to the training. And then probably we move on to venue specific training, which will be familiarizing the volunteers with the assigned venues, the layouts, the facilities, the entry points, exit points, refreshments. If it is for the athletes, where are they put up? What are the timings like? When do you expect crowd in the stage area? When do you expect crowd in the back area? So those kind of familiarity building. Then I have put role-based training, like Jagdish had mentioned. So the roles also I have defined as volunteers identified for spectator services. So spectator services like the audience who comes in, what will their seating be like? What are the cohorts of spectators, as in the regular people, then the VIPs, VVIPs, panelists. So what kind of service needs to be done to these different cohorts of spectators? So that would be the spectator-based role. Then there is athlete support. So a set of volunteers for the athlete support. This I think Gauri had mentioned on receiving the athletes. Allocation of rooms or dorms, those kind of things. In order, so that is also something that they need to be trained on. Recreation and downtime for the athletes. How do you mobilize that, and the practice support that the athletes may want. So before the games and all, if they want a turf to practice there, so there how do you go about? So that would be the task that the volunteers who are for athlete support end up doing. Then there is media operations and medical services, paramedics or whatever, security and access control, and also role based. We identify what the volunteers need to do and make it very clear, a process flow very clear to them of what is expected out of them. Moving on from there, a detailed 1 day on safety and security procedures, which will have your emergency response trainings. It will have your evacuation drills, which has to be done, even as a part of the mock drill, the security protocols and all of that. So a day can be dedicated for that. Then there will be tech and system training. So basically the accreditation system, like Gauri was saying, 0.005. How to not jump at the wrong result and announce the wrong name and these kind of things. So be very clear of your systems, be clear of your communication tools provided to you, maybe the walkie-talkie or whatever it is that they're using. A ticketing software, be familiar with that, issuing the ticket, directing them to the right place. So that was what comes under tech and systems training. Then I also kept a day of scenario-based training. So athlete having a cold feet, or practice K time there is an injury, if there is a no-show, if we have run out of certain materials, which is extremely crucial, be it in terms of food or even sports equipment. And these kind of things, athlete comes back saying that I'm not happy with this gear, I want something else. So those kind of job-based situations, which probably they have faced at the prior Olympics, we have a list of that and take them through those scenarios and ask, show them the best way to handle this in the minimum possible time. And then have practice sessions of whatever's done, so a refresher, and ended up with a feedback and evaluation. But last of all, mentorship program is extremely crucial. So you assign a seasoned volunteer with a first-time volunteer, and you make teams out of them and assign to them roles accordingly. So this is what I put together in terms of a training program once they are in our hands and they need to get going.
I think very practical, because you literally put what Gauri and Jagdish have said into action. I think I really like the fact that you talked about how you can identify objectives very previously to figure out which one they can do on their own and which one they can actually spend time doing when they come there, which for us would translate to what are some things that we don't have to spend money on in terms of getting everybody together physically in a location. Can we figure out which of those can be done in case easy? So thank you so much, Jovita. That's very, very valuable. In the interest of time, I'm quickly just going to share the key takeaways that we've discussed. There are 8 in nature. I'm not going to go through all of them, but definitely in the following weeks, you can expect some activity and buzz around this that we will share on our various social media handles, talking about this and maybe quoting some of our panelists, actually all of our panelists on this, and help analyze this a little bit further. So that, in conclusion, is what our webinar was going to be about. It was talking about how can we look at various training initiatives, how can they be measured, and how do they connect to the business objectives, even though at a large scale or at a big picture level, we looked at course completion and true indicator and skilled frontline employees. We've gone a little deeper and figured out that this is what we wanted to talk about in this webinar. So that officially will conclude the webinar. But I think I'd just request the panelists to answer 2 questions that have come in from the audience before they leave, and I thank them for their time. So the first one was, I think, something I mentioned initially, where you may not get the quality of team members that you assume you will get. How then do we handle that scenario? So any of you would like to take that up in answering that?
So maybe I should take that up. Look, we're the moderators in between, right? Operators need somebody quickly. HR are under pressure to get somebody on board, right? And then like Jovita said, the blame comes on eventually. The training was not correct, right? So I would say, first of all, we have to clearly define the job description. We have to define the job role, 1. 2, I do understand. I mean, you want a gem who knows everything, and you want the person today, right? But what we can do is we can also create like a skill matrix for that particular role, and define the fact that there are these kind of skills where we want this kind of proficiency, and we're not going to be compromising on that. And there are certain skills where we are aware that the person is below average, but is not as much a requirement for the particular role. And with time, we'll kind of build on those. And then if you define that skill matrix, it makes the life of HR also better, because they understand that these are proficiencies that I should look at. And then also your operations team is clear that, yes, we know that this is something the person is good at and can quickly start on the job. And there are certain skills and competencies that we'll work on that person as time goes by. And then the trainers also kind of define that very clearly, saying, these are the skills that we'll work on. These are the weaknesses. These are the strengths, and we keep working on the weaknesses, and we keep building on the strengths. And then if I've answered that kind of,
and get them to where we want, essentially.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to take up that? Share any thoughts? Or okay. I think we'll move to the next one. So the next one is, I think, what Jovita, you spoke about in splitting modules into smaller bite-sized pieces. So the question is, do you think we'll split the question that I'm kind of reading into it is, if we split it into multiple bite-sized modules, we might lose them because they have to come back to the LMS multiple times. And if there's, let's say, 4 or 5 videos, getting them to come to the LMS like 5 times to do those videos is a pain. The second is, do you think the content itself should be shrunk to 2 minutes to say, can we get in one sitting what's the best that we can do, so that we engage the learner at that point in time? So your thoughts here.
So splitting it in bite-sized module, I'll tell you for practical example of what I have implemented with a success. I mean, the completion rate was 98% in a place where the new hire training completion stands at 3% as of today. So we basically identified 16 customer service touchpoint scenarios, and we kind of made videos on what are the employee behaviors, staff behavior for those key, like suppose the customer is shopping but doesn't have a trolley in his hand, or at the time of billing, how do you interact with the customers, and 16 scenarios of the right behavior and the wrong behavior, both. So wrong behavior was something that we normally observe that happens in the store. So that also was called out, and followed by, how can we do this? Let's look at how so and so mascot does it. Now 16 scenarios of yes and no I was able to bring it down to 15 minutes, 15. We split it out in 16 videos. Every video was not more than 1 minute, 1 minute, 10 seconds. It takes a lot of time to make it that precise, but it's doable. So the time that goes is for the content curator to make it that engaging and real kinds. And one sitting of 15 minutes is very much doable. And this is then backed up with video-based process notes. So you see the demonstration, you see the steps involved in doing those demonstrations, and it's all available as a reckoner for him in the backend, and it's doable. But today, if you talk about removing the person from the shop floor, because we're talking about frontline employees and making them sit in a classroom, there is no guarantee that he's walking out of the classroom knowing everything and his productivity is going to improve in day one. It's not going to. It's going to take him a minimum amount of time, say 30 days or 45 days, till he also gets good at that particular job. So if that time is anyways involved for him to master the skills, we might as well look at ways and means to make learning a part of his daily work and not as an additional, tax.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I think makes very good sense. That answers the question, I think, head on as well. John, would you like to add as well?
Yes, I would sort of, I just wanted to, what sort of, caught my attention was someone asking about if these contents are split into various small scale videos, does it not lose attention from the, the learner? I have a different thought on this, and I would rather have a complete content split into smaller videos and have someone coming back to the viewing of the videos after practical demonstration of it, right? Rather than seeing everything at the same time and probably not understanding any of that, right? That's rightly said by Jovita. If anything, any video which is more than a minute or minute and a half, sort of gonna just get boring, right? And this Gen Z is the most challenging, what we call, they are the most dynamic kind of set of people that we are dealing with, right? So to have them, to make them, keeping them engaged on is something that you need to be very top notch with your content, making sure that that whatever content that we have is delivered in the right way and in the most lucrative way, I would call it, right? And what's more important is once the person has seen the content, it is also very important that he or she practices that. Okay. So it's absolutely okay for me that somebody sees one video, goes and practices it for a couple of minutes or maybe a few hours or a few days and comes back and revisits another one instead of just doing everything at one time. So I would rather have one content split into various smaller bits and pieces and having someone mastered it at a smaller bits than having everything read together and struggling with getting the final objective. So that's how I look at it.
Got it. Yeah, thanks, Jagdish. I think that also complements what Jovita said in terms of putting it down into bite-sized pieces, specific objective, measurement, like you said, and then demonstration is definitely the next bit. So that, I think, concludes. There's one question in terms of I think they've also thanked you for answering the questions. So that's a very nice thank you, Vinay. There's another question in catering content in vernacular languages, but that I think we have addressed in the course of our discussion, so we won't address that specifically. But that, I think, formally thus concludes the webinar. So thank you so much, panelists, for being with us. And
just a last point, sorry, Susanna, just a last point. So we are having AI tools now where you input your content, simple content in English, and it translates it into vernacular. So that also has become very cheap. And let us as training professionals create more and more demand for it so that we have more such solutions in the market which are more accurate to the Indian languages. So as on today, Hindi works very well, but if you talk about Kannada or Tamil and this kind of things, they're still, struggling and making it better. So they will also, and these are all homegrown talent, so, Indian companies. So let's create a demand for that, because that is what will help our front end, and it will also help us to scale up our efforts economically. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that answers the last question that we had in our line. So again, thank you so much, panelists, for spending the time with us and answering these questions, especially sharing your thoughts and the effort that you put in for the practical scenario. I think that's the one that we're going to use for the rest of maybe the month, to showcase how your skills can translate and help others learn from certain skills that you've imbibed through the examples that you've shared with us. So thank you once again for being with us and for sharing your knowledge. We've had a wonderful time, and I hope we can interact on like this more often as well.